Hello, my name is Gary Erskine, and welcome to the short introduction to character design, part of Thought Bubble Fringe. So I'll be showing you how to use colours, patterns, texture, shapes to create your own character design, how to add props and other attributes to fully realise your character design. So where do we start? Well, for me, I usually start with the name. The name is the most immediate thing to get across who your character is, obviously. It's the title of the comic, it's the title of the movie, or the animation, or the video game that you're buying. The name is possibly the first thing that people come into contact with. So with that regards, the first character that I'm going to show as an example is one that I did not design, but hopefully you'll be very familiar with, and that's Captain America. Captain America, just the name itself conjures up so much. Captain, a person of authority, and America, where he's from. It's a quick identifier to show the location of where this hero comes from. And I say, very, very effective. I didn't design this character, obviously. I have drawn the character for Marvel Comics a few years ago for Captain America Theatre of War, America the Beautiful. But the actual creators were the writer Joe Sinnott and Jack Kirby, the artist who almost single-handedly created so many wonderful Marvel superheroes that you probably read or seen more recently in the Marvel movies. The next thing I think about are the colours. And quite obviously, with Captain America, there are three primary colours for his costume: red, white, and blue. Why those particular colours? Well, they're the colours of the American flag. They're also the colours of the Dutch, French, Russian, and the British flag. So that creates a little bit of confusion. What we need to do is show this, a representation of this on our character to identify them. And that's basically where pattern comes into it. We want to show the pattern of the American flag and the colours, red, white, and blue, to distinguish it from any other flag and any other country. Now, the first thing that springs to mind normally is a gentleman wearing a flag suit at some sporting event or a political demonstration, and that just doesn't work in comics. So what we have here is, certainly on the right, it's Jack Kirby illustration. We have the colours, red, white, and blue, obviously the name Captain America, but we have the pattern of the American flag, not an exact representation, but we have a white star on blue on the chest. We have the red and white stripes around the stomach, and we actually have the pattern on the shield. Even though they're circles, there still is a representation of the flag on the shield. The letter A on the forehead helps, and also the ears, which are actually, well, above the ears they have eagle wings, and therefore the American bald eagle, which is the national bird. So there's a lot of visual clues being shown here to basically say that this is Captain America. Now, bear in mind, we saw the British flag earlier. What would Captain Britain look like? Well, these are two examples here, or both Alan Davis, and as you can see on the right-hand side here, there's a much clearer sort of visualization of the British flag on the helmet. You can see the way that it's adapted the other design elements from the flag onto the costume. The British flag itself is actually made up of the Scottish, Welsh, and English flag. It doesn't look exactly like the flag, but there are enough visual clues and representations there to show you that this is Captain Britain and not Captain America. And this works in sport. Here we have the British cycling team, 3 successive years. And you can see quite clearly that there are elements of the design of the British flag actually incorporated into this design, some more obvious than others. I particularly like the middle one. I think that's quite striking. And it's a clear identifier in sport. Sport very commonly uses the colours and the patterns of the national flag to actually help show where the competitors are from and who they're competing for. And here is actually one of the years, I think this was about 6 years ago, And these are my illustrations for Team GB British Cycling. We have Sir Bradley Wiggins in the middle, Lizzie Armistead on the right, who is also road, and Laura Trott, who I believe is now Laura Kenny. She married Jason Kenny. They're both track endurance athletes. And the brief was to show the cyclists in their costumes, and obviously an action pose of them on their actual bike in their actual chosen discipline. And they do kind of look like superheroes, and the way that the colours and the patterns actually say where they're from. Now, you don't have to default to the national flag. Well, actually, in this case, you can. In football, quite obvious on the left with Argentina here. And on the right, we have Brazil. And Brazil carries the colours more than anything else through the shirt and the shorts, where with Argentina, it's more or less the whole design is on the shirt itself. So they're using the flag to carry across where they actually come from. Now, another option is actually national dress. And here we get three wonderful examples of that. On the left, we have a woman from Peru, and you can see there's some beautiful designs and patterns and textures showing the sort of cultural references, and the fabric as well is quite striking. In the middle, we have a Japanese woman wearing a kimono. Again, kimonos can be very different colors and patterns, but the look and the design, the cultural sort of choice here is quite obviously telling you that this person's from Japan. And on the right, we have a Maasai warrior here. And again, look at the colors, you know, quite vibrant and striking jewelry and fabrics and what have you. And if you have seen the Black Panther movie, there's some wonderful costume design on that from Ruth Carter. I believe she won an Oscar for that. I'll probably have to check on IMDb now. But Ruth's work on this was quite extraordinary. She looked at all the different tribes in Africa and looked at the sort of the cultural references and the designs and, you know, the fabrics and what have you, the jewelry, and adapted it in a kind of using Afrofuturism to adapt it and bring it up to date and modify it so it worked in the Marvel Black Panther universe, but still could be easily recognizable to the specific tribes that were referencing it. That were referenced from, and quite striking work. If you haven't seen Black Panther, I would definitely recommend it. It's a stunning movie. Texture. Texture's like pattern, but it's more obviously tactile, and what I would use texture for is if I wasn't trying to show where someone's from, if I wasn't trying to use cultural references and national dress or national flags to show someone's power. Maybe I'm trying to highlight the attributes of the character, the strengths that they have from being bitten by a radioactive creature or animal of sorts. This particular pattern, I'm hoping that as a visual clue, you're starting to think about scales, maybe some sort of reptilian sort of scale, crocodiles, lizards, snakes, possibly. Sometimes when I do this workshop in schools, there'll be someone in the back shouting out that it looks like dragon scales. And that immediately takes it from a superhero sort of genre into fantasy, and we'll have knights and princesses and orcs and ogres, a bit like Witcher or Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, just by using those specific textures and colors together. Changing the color, I'm hoping now you're starting to think of maybe a fish scales, probably Finding Nemo, leading the witness of it. But the idea is that now that you're seeing a visual clue, a prompt, getting you to think about fish and the possible powers and attributes that would be equated with something that lives underwater, I'm hoping you'll start to think about Aquaman or Namor, or characters who are able to swim very fast, hold their breath for a long time, maybe even breathe underwater. Maybe they can manipulate water in some way. Maybe that is their power. or maybe even communicate to underwater life like fish, sharks, whales, or what have you. And that's just by changing the colors from the same texture pattern. Previously was green and black, which we're thinking about reptiles and snakes and dragons. With orange and black, we're starting to think about fish underwater, what have you. Keeping the colors, but changing the texture, I'm now very obviously trying to get you to think about a tiger. And the attributes of a tiger, I would say very, very strong and very fierce and courageous, probably err towards hero. That said, you know, it's been used before in Tekken, the PlayStation game, where one of the characters, King, who is sort of street fighter, and he's wearing just a shirt and trousers, and certainly Tekken 2, which I remember fondly, but has a tiger mask or the head of a tiger. Never really quite found out which version of that is true. But yeah, the attributes of the tiger very clearly showing his particular strengths and what have you. Keeping the texture, but changing the colors. And now suddenly we have a zebra pattern, obviously. And zebras are supposedly very fast, but also have a mean kick with their back legs. If you've ever seen any of that footage with David Attenborough and some poor lions try to capture and attack a zebra, they usually get a good swift kick into the face. If your hero, superhero, or villain has that particular strength, that attribute, I would probably defer to this pattern, certainly on the leggings. It's about showing visual clues and prompts to suggest the power that the character has. Changing the colors and the texture completely. This particular shot is obviously the pattern of a cheetah. And if this were on the leggings, what I'm trying to get across very quickly, even before you hear the name, with the texture and the colors here, I'm trying to get you to think of a cheetah. I'm trying to get you to think that the power, the attributes afforded to this character are that they can run very, very fast. I would not have this pattern on a character who has swimming or fish powers like Aquaman, just like I wouldn't use a tiger pattern texture on a character who is maybe able to change their appearance like a chameleon or breathe fire like a dragon. It's about using colors, pattern and texture to show where a person's from, to show the attributes of a certain animal or creature. And with the name, obviously, you can reinforce that a little bit more. And in some cases, you can actually use very strong, almost graphic design to show the powers, the attributes to a person. In this particular case, it's the power of the elements on the left. We have the power of fire, the human torch springs to mind very quickly. And on the right, most people go straight to ice, Iceman, obviously, or Frozone in The Incredibles. Just the strong use of color and design to very quickly and effectively give you a strong visual clue as to the attributes of those particular characters. It could be two separate characters. It could be the same character with two different powers shown by the gloves alone. The rest of the costume is moot. As long as you show that the gloves are specific colors with a specific design, you can quite effectively indicate the strengths of this character. So now that I've talked about how the name, the colors, and the choice of pattern and the use of texture can help to show where a character's from or the powers and attributes, I'm now going to show that you don't need that exclusively. And this is the use of a silhouette, a strong silhouette, a shape, a shadow, basically. Why is this important? Well, it's really important in animation and video games. A strong silhouette can quite effectively give a sense of scale. Think about the Incredible Hulk. Think about the shape of the Incredible Hulk. Before you see that he's actually green and before you hear the name, just the silhouette is enough to give a sense of strength and power. Think about Batman. Think about most Disney or Pixar characters. They have very, very strong silhouettes, because if you get that right, everything else, the texture and the colors and the pattern, and then finally the name, obviously, they just help add to what's already there. I'll show you some quick examples. This one, I would hope you would get straight away. It's like one of those quizzes you see in a comic or online. Can you recognize this particular character from their silhouette? In this case, quite obviously, it's BB-8. Now, I've drawn BB-8 for a cover, and I can tell you the pattern's very difficult to do, but the silhouette sells it. It's a larger sphere with a smaller half sphere on top, and there's a couple of aerials as well. The colors and the pattern obviously help, but that is such a strong silhouette, and it works so effectively. And I can remember when I saw Star Wars: A New Hope, I was about 9 years old, and a lot of the ships were very geometric in shape, and R2-D2, for all intents and purposes, was a dustbin on legs. And for me at 9 years old, I could draw well enough, but I could draw the Star Destroyers, I could draw X-Wings, and I could draw R2-D2 because they were very primitive geometric shapes. And now with The Force Awakens and the subsequent movies, I'm seeing a new generation who can copy this shape very quickly and effectively, because it's very, very strong and quite recognizable, regardless if the pattern's correct or not. Just getting that shape is everything. Here's 5 characters, all from the same franchise. And again, they're so strong and they're so effective that you probably guessed them already. And it's The Incredibles. And on the left, starting on the left, we have Mr. Incredible. Again, look at the physicality, the upper body strength of this character. It's quite effective. To the right of Mr. Incredible, we have Elastigirl. Again, more curvaceous. Obviously, there's maybe a hint that the body is able to be moved and plied into different shapes, but definitely a very distinct shape and different to Mr. Incredible. Then we have Violet, and although Violet doesn't really give away too much, there is we'll get to it later, her prop is this sphere of purple sort of plasma type energy that she can use to generate force shields and what have you. My favorite is still Dash. The proportions, the head's big to the size of the body, but what they're trying to show with the body is a connection with Mr. Incredible, his father. They're trying to show that he is although he's short, he's stocky. There is a direct link, albeit half the size, to his father. He will grow in to become his father. And then we round off with the wonderful Jack, who quite obviously just looks like a baby. You're going for size there, and the proportion of the head to the body really helps sell that this is a baby, where Dash is a child, Violet is more going into a teenager, and then you get mum and dad. It's such a beautiful design. It works on many, many levels. It starts at the strong silhouette, the fact that they're all each distinct, and then you layer on in this case, the pattern and the colors, and then the names just are the chef's kiss icing on the cake. It's perfect. Here are 5 characters from Fortnite. Fortnite is a popular online game. There are many, many other characters in this particular series. You've also got Overwatch, and for me, Quake Arena. And it's the same principle. It's creating a strong silhouette so the characters are instantly recognizable. And then you layer on top, in this case, such wonderful textures and colors and patterns before you even get to the names. And then, once you've gone through those stages, and I think those 4 initial stages are possibly the most important, you then get to props. And believe me, there are so many props in Overwatch and Fortnite. Some you have to pay for, but that's a whole other story. But props are items. They're additional props that you add to your character to give them purpose, to whether it's a motorcycle like Canada in Orkira, whether it's Cloud's sword, very, very large sword in Final Fantasy, Or in the case of the Marvel movies, it's Hawkeye's bow and arrow. Now with Hawkeye, the name works. Hawkeye is someone who has a very sharp, clear eyesight, probably, definitely 2020. But the pattern of the suit, you know, there's texture there. It looks tactical, kind of like SWAT, but there's not really more information, visual clues there to tell you what he does, apart from the fact that he's got very good eyesight. So in this particular case, his skill is with a bow and arrow. So the prop and the name are what help sell him as a character. And yes, when he's holding the prop, it creates a more interesting silhouette. But ultimately, it's the prop here that is really the defining part of this character. And the name just helps cement that. Thor with his hammer Mjolnir. What I like about Thor is, while they've updated the costume, it still looks traditional. It's still very, very grounded in the culture. There's some lovely detailing, if you look closely, either here or online. You see some wonderful detailing on the hammer. It's such a fully realized costume and design, and the prop just helps sell it. Wonder Woman. We're moving into DC universe, and this is obviously the movie representation of Wonder Woman, but it still carries. And here we actually have 5 props. We have the lasso of truth. There's a hint of it just on the belt near the back. The lasso of truth is probably the most familiar prop item that Wonder Woman uses. But there's also the gauntlets that can generate a power blast, an energy shield, and what have you. Certainly in the movie, in the first movie, they really pushed it forward. There's the sword and the shield, more combative, but linked back into the sort of Greek mythology that Wonder Woman is derived from. And certainly a nice little throwaway in, I think it was Batman versus Superman. The tiara headband that she's wearing uses some sort of boomerang device as another weapon of sorts to disable or knock out bad people. So 5 different props for Wonder Woman. And then Captain America, going back to the character we started with, primarily the shield. It's both a defensive thing, very much like the shield that Wonder Woman used in the movie when she was in the trenches, but it can also be used as a weapon to, be bounce off walls and knock people out and what have you, and be used as a prop to hold open doors or break things in half. And what I'd like you to look at, and again, we touched on it earlier, is the design of the shield. There are 3 stripes, 2 red, 1 white, and there's 1 single white star on blue. Again, it's a visual clue. It's tying into the American flag without it being an American flag with 50 stars and 13 red or white stripes. It's using the iconography and design to very simply say, this is Captain America's shield. And it kind of leads us on to the 6th and final part, which is logos. And certainly a logo is incredibly important. It's usually the quick identifier on the chest. Think of a logo as an icon on your phone or an avatar. It's a graphic symbol, whether it's for Facebook, other social medias are available, or Snapchat, or whether it's for your email or YouTube. It's usually very simple, very stylized, but quickly and effectively tells you the purpose of that particular app, or in this case, identifies the character. These are my 3 favorite logos, and obviously quite recognizable. On the left, we have Superman's shield that he has, as in it's on his chest. In the movie, they say it's a symbol, it stands for hope. It doesn't. It's an S, it stands for Superman. Simple as that. In the middle, probably one of the most instantly familiar logos in comics, Batman, the Bat logo. A bat, single black bat on a yellow background. And then on the right, we return to Captain America's shield. And again, it doesn't look exactly like the American flag, but there are enough clues, visual clues, to identify that as an American object to tie in with his costume. Now, normally when I show these prompt cards in schools, there's someone at the back screaming out about the Bat logo being upside down. I only did that once, I was embarrassed, but now I've actually brought it into the presentations because it's so instantly identifiable that when I use prompt cards when I teach in school, I will show the card deliberately upside down. People instantly recognize it and then correct me by telling me it's upside down. I'll go back. It's not that different. The Superman logo would be much more noticeable, and possibly the American Captain America shield. But with the bat logo, it's quite subtle, but it's still so instantly recognizable that people know it's wrong. So now I've incorporated it into this presentation, and I think it's something that shows that you already know how this works. If you're wanting to create your own comic book characters or video game characters or design for film and television, you already know how this works. When you play a video game or you see a movie or you read a comic book, the characters appear on screen. You see a visual representation of them before you hear their name. You see the costume, you see the colors, you see the pattern, the texture, you see a strong silhouette. There's possibly a prop, and there will be a logo. And your brain is processing all that information and coming to the conclusion that that is Superman, that is Batman, and that is Captain America. Now, granted, these are very broad strokes that I'm showing you, but ultimately, when you get to seeing it as a list, there are more subtle nuances you can put into characters, and it can get much more complicated as well if you wish. But it really does come down to these 6 very simple steps. And I would say the first 4 are probably the strongest to concentrate on. But if you want to design your own character, what I would do is write down all the cool names that you think your character might like to have, that makes a quick association to who they are, where they're from, whether they're good or evil. That could be in the name as well. Think about the names of some of the Star Wars characters. Some of them just sound evil, and some of them sound more like the heroes of the piece. Think about the colors that you like. Think about how the colors associate with where the person is from, whether they're good or bad. And you can obviously change certain tropes, have a hero in black, like the Princess Bride, have baddies in white, Nemesis from Mark Millar's story, or even stormtroopers in Star Wars who wear white. You can break tropes and genre traditions to mess things up a bit. Think about patterns or textures, highlighting the powers and attributes of a character either derived from nature or animals, or whether they're from the future or from the past. And think about that strong silhouette as well. Just think of all the characters that you're familiar with and work backwards. When you're presented with a character in the cinema or in a comic book or on video or in a video game, all these items are presented to you. When you design your own character, you start with a blank sheet of paper. But the cool thing is you get to make the choices. You get to decide the cool name, the colors, the pattern and textures, the silhouette. Decide on a cool prop or props. Big sword like Cloud, on a motorbike like Akira, and maybe a cool shield like Captain America. Just throw everything into the mix. Nothing will stop you. And then think of a cool logo. One is not necessarily more important than another, but I would say the first 4 really help more to fully realize your character, and mix them up a bit. Normally I would sketch some things, or I'd write down a shopping list of all the cool stuff that I like, and then it's just a case of refining that, getting rid of things that don't work, changing the colors a bit, working with the silhouette, and who knows, before you know it, you've got a fully realized hero. And even if you're happy with it, you can still evolve and change it over time. There's really no need to feel that you have to get it right first time. Look at some of the designs, the early designs of Captain America. Look at some of the early designs of Iron Man. There's so many. My personal favourite is the version that Bob Layton was working on in this sort of um, early to mid 80s. Um, if you look at the original Iron Man, it looked like a collection of soup tins without the label. So they were refining Iron Man from the soup tin creature through the 80s into the 90s with War Machine, and now we've got so many versions thanks to the video games and the movies. So don't feel that you have to get it right first time. It's quite fun to adapt and change, be influenced by other books or movies or whatever inspires you. But yeah, plenty to think about.